Merci, bonjour. Bonjour à tous.
Thank you and good morning. The chair kindly greets the interpreters. I suggest that we begin with PC 26 COM documents.
Donc,
The first COM document that we're going to consider is PC 26 COM 6, Review of Significant Trade. I'd like to give the floor to the chair of that working group, the representative of Oceania. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The in-session working group on the review of significant trade met during both the morning and afternoon of 8th of June to consider documents PC 26, Doc 16.2 to 16.5. The working group took considerable care to address the extensive mandate, and I thank the working group for their collegiate approach to the discussions, and the Secretariat for helping us navigate these complex discussions too. The working group started with PC 26 Doc 16.5, selecting a limited number of species country combinations of greatest concern for inclusion in stage 2 of the review of significant trade, and to draft recommendations for the Plants Committee to consider in preparation for the Secretariat's report on these matters to the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee. Paragraph D1 of PC 26 Com 6 presents a table of species country combinations in accordance with paragraph 1B of Resolution Conf 12.8 Rev Cop 18. 8 species were identified by the working group as having sufficient justification for inclusion in the process, in combination with one or more range states. However, I do note that the working group did not have sufficient time to further refine this list of species country combinations. Under paragraph D2, the working group made further recommendations to the Secretariat and some observations in relation to 4 additional species and non-range states recorded as trading in these species. The working group also noted concerns on the data presented in the tables found in the annexes to document PC 26 Doc 16.5, specifically concerning trade that was indicated as artificially propagated, source code A, by the exporting party that was subsequently reported as wild, source code W, by the importing party. The issue being the importer data is what is used in the gross analysis. The working group recommends inviting the Secretariat to liaise with UNEP WCMC to see if there is a way that such errors could be addressed at an earlier stage in the RST process in future analysis. Under PC 26 Doc 16.2, the working group considered 3 species country combinations covered in PC 26 Doc 16.2. These included Democratic Republic of Congo for Paracopsis alata, for which the working group recommends the Secretariat publish the quota proposed by the Democratic Republic of Congo. Also for the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Prunus africana, for which the working group recommends the Secretariat take into account the positive feedback received on the progress made by the Democratic Republic of the Congo in its report to the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee. For Panama, Dalbergia retusa, for which the working group recommends for the Secretariat to consider removal of Panama Dalbergia retusa in its reporting to Standing Committee 77, due to Panama's intention to retain the zero export quota until higher quotas are deemed sustainable. Under PC 26 Doc 16.3, the working group considered the information presented and submitted by Madagascar in PC 26 Doc 16.3. The working group acknowledges and commends the work and progress of Madagascar in meeting the recommendations of the Plants Committee and provided additional recommendations. Under PC 26 Doc 16.4, the working group reviewed the existing species country combinations presented in the document and made recommendations related to each species country combination, which are set out in detail in PC 26 Com 6. Chair, I would like to propose the following amendments to PC 26 Com 6 as follows. In regards to membership of the working group, I can advise that the following observer parties were not originally identified as members, but were accepted by the Chair to join the discussions. These observer parties include Australia, Cameroon, Ireland, Peru, Switzerland and Togo. Furthermore, I would like to correct the membership of the representatives by deleting Ms Moser as the representative for Europe and instead having Ms Moser as the representative for Switzerland. Under PC 26.16.5, paragraph D2, relating to Cyathea species, the query on Cyathea was discussed in the working group and Indonesia provided the requested explanation, so the paragraph on Cyathea can be removed. Still under paragraph D2, in relation to mammillaria species, I would like to propose the following amendment, which was suggested by Singapore. The amendment will correct the list of range states for mammalia species. The amended paragraph would read, the working group discussed trade in mammillaria species, which is native to the Americas, comma, and noted exports of this species from China, the Netherlands, and Iran. And then continue with the rest of the paragraph as presented. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
I would like to thank the working group chair for that report.
Donc,
We have heard the report of the working group chaired by the representative for Oceania. This working group was on RST. I would like to hear the plenary's comments on the report. First of all, we're going to hear from working group members. And we want to make sure that we have the membership of the working group clear. So could I ask if members of the committee have any comments to make on the report? COM 6, Asia, to be followed by Africa.
First of all, just to correct the membership of the working group, Asia was represented by both Ms. Zheng. So Zheng is the family name, not Yen, and also myself, Mr. Chong. And also we would like to add Singapore. Unfortunately, I'm wearing two hats to the parties for the working group. We would also like to thank the chair of the working group and the secretariat for drafting the recommendations in that last paragraph of the ComDoc. We would like to thank UNEP, WCMC, for reaching out to us after the working group session to show us the trade data that was used and pinpoint the discrepancies that we observed. Asia supports this recommendation in the last paragraph that would address these discrepancies, which we view as errors as early as possible and improve the RST process for all parties in the long term. And we also would like to express our support for the amendments to the paragraph on mammillaria. In the immediate term, notwithstanding our support for the last recommendation, Resolution Conf 12.8 regarding the conduct of the review of significant trade states that in stage 1, the review on the preliminary selection of species country combinations should be do so on the basis that includes information available to the parties. And parties have actually already brought up specific information that there were errors in the data that was used for this review. So the time to correct the errors for the analysis for stage 1 should be in stage 1 itself. Our understanding is that after today's session, these species country combinations progress to stage 2, and therefore we think that this is our chance to correct the errors in stage 1. Therefore, several parties in Asia still express their disagreement with being listed among the species country combinations progressing to stage 2, even when we have actually pointed out that there are errors in the data. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. The representative for Africa has the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving us a chance to comment on document PC26-COM6. We thank the working group chair and the members for the good report provided. However, we have noted that the conclusion of the working group is not well rendered regarding the DRC, as it has been recommended by the working group to request for the withdrawal of the review of significant trade in Pericops alata and Prunus africana from the DRC in view of the several advances. There was no opposition in the working group to the request made by the DRC. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Merci.
Thank you. I would now like to hear from observer parties, since I don't see any more committee members requesting the floor. The DRC has requested the floor. Please go ahead. And Singapore will follow. Thank you, Madam. I would like to thank the chair of the working group for this document. I agree with what was said by the representative for Africa. There is a little bit missing with respect to the DRC. Progress in the DRC was shown, but with respect, there's something here on prunus, but we said it should be the same for Pericopsis, and there does seem to be some language missing here, as there was as we recall, there was no opposition to what was suggested with respect to Pericopsis. I do agree with the representative for Africa. There's a paragraph missing here with respect to the DRC and significant trade. I would like to thank the representative of the DRC for that statement. And I now give the floor to Singapore, to be followed by Malaysia.
Thank you again, Chair. Now speaking as the Singapore representative, Singapore would also like to thank the working group chair for presenting the document on behalf of the working group members. Singapore would like to reiterate our points brought up in the in-session working group discussions that is not reflected in the COM document. The identification of Aquilaria malaxensis and Singapore as the species-country combination comes as a surprise to Singapore. Singapore is a city-state and has no forestry sector. We do not harvest our native Aquilaria malaccensis trees, and we have zero direct exports. In the working group, Singapore has stated that we only re-export Aquilaria malaccensis. The UK then stated that their data also shows that Singapore is a re-exporter. Resolution Conf 12.8 clearly states that in the RST Stage 1, the summary from the CITES trade database shall present the recorded level of direct exports for Appendix 2 species over the 5 most recent years. This is also confirmed in the explanation of the methodology used for PC 26 Doc 16.5 Annex 1, Table 1, under the CITES trade database report type. Direct trade only. Re-exports are excluded. However, the use of export data in the gross analysis, as described in the last paragraph of the COM document, resulted in the erroneous recording of Singapore as a range state that exports agar wood in Table 3 of Annex 2. Madam Chair, in light of this factual error, Singapore is to be excluded from the species-country combinations indicated in the table in this COM doc. Thank you.
Merci, Singapore.
I thank you, Singapore, for your statement. Do we have any other requests for the floor from parties?
Je ne vois pas. Ah,
I do not see any. United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair.
excusez-moi, j'avais donné la parole.
I beg your pardon. I had offered Malaysia the floor straight after Singapore. So Malaysia and then the United Kingdom. Thank you. My apologies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, we'd like to say thank you to the Chair, Mr. Damien, of the Working Group of RST. Malaysia strongly support the issues and proposal that has been raised by our representative of Asia, and the issues also raised by Singapore. Malaysia has raised the issue that the data that has been reflected in the report of WCMC is mainly from the artificially propagated data, and it's not from the wild. Whatever that is traded through the wild is still within the quota the annual quota that has been approved within the country. Therefore, we believe that whatever, in line with what our representative of Asia has mentioned, whatever mistakes of discrepancies of data that has been highlighted should be corrected within this process before taken into the next process. So I hope that can be considered. Thank you.
Merci,
Thank you, Malaysia. I now give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. We thank the Chair of the Working Group and the Secretariat for this report. We do have 2 interventions regarding some grammatical errors in the report, and then we'd also like to comment on the issue of Aquilaria malacensis. Chair, would you like me to continue malacensis or the grammatical errors? How should I? Don't mind? Okay. So the grammatical...
Aquilaria, s'il vous plaît.
Aquilaria first, please, and then we'll go to the grammar.
Okay. The United Kingdom recognizes that Singapore is a range state for this species, and that we do, as the UK, we see trade for Aquilaria malacensis as a re-export from Singapore. At this first stage of the process, we would like Singapore to remain on the list, thus enabling them to confirm their status as a purely transit country. It is a case that they are a range state, they do not harvest, and it's a transit country. Therefore, we would like clarification on the process of RST regarding document 16.5. This was discussed in the working group. However, we feel it would benefit plenary for those who may not have been in the working group to clarify this process again. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
I thank you. I will come back to you on the grammar matters. So, I have Germany who have requested the floor, Panama, and the DRC. You'd like the floor once more? So first of all, I'll let those who haven't yet spoken. So Germany to be followed by Panama.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to comment on Agavut as well and align myself with the comment made by the United Kingdom. I think it was explained several times yesterday in the working group that this stage, which is following now, is there to provide evidence whether or whether not a species should be retained, and therefore it's appropriate to keep these, the results of the working group as it stands. Thank you very much.
Merci, Allemagne.
Thank you, Germany. I now give the floor to Panama. Good morning. Once more, we would like to thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to put a bit more stress on the issue of Dalbergia retusa when it comes to Panama. In addition to a zero quota, we would like to highlight that the Republic of Panama is not considering opening a market once more in the short or medium term. And the authorities for biodiversity in Panama, we are also in charge of the national parks and protected areas. And Dalbergia retusa, what remains are within the protected areas, the canal, the Panama Canal, the areas nearby, those that are easily accessed, and the Darien Forest, which we share with Colombia, 500,000 hectares. All of the seizures of cocoa bolo timber that we have registered, that's virtually all come from protected areas. So the Republic of Panama is not interested in, nor considering in the short or medium term of the market. It is closed for Dalbergia retusa in Panama. So I'd like to highlight that once more. In addition to having a zero quota, we want to close the market in Dalbergia retusa. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Panama.
Donc, je redonne la parole.
I'll give the floor back to the DRC. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I won't go back over what has already said. It's just a point that was indicated to the working group under point D of the document 16.5. There was the Tilis Lanceolata, and all the range states were mentioned there. And it was highlighted that Tilis Lanceolata from DRC is not listed in CITES appendices. So we see there's a star, an asterisk, which should have an explanation in the footnote. Is that what it was? Shouldn't we have some note in the footnote to say that it's not listed in Appendix CITES, the plant, the tree that is in this table? So I wanted to just check the footnotes, please. Thank you, the DRC. United Kingdom, you want to
come back on the grammar points, or is it a matter of substance?
Points, but it can wait till discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Donc, je donne la parole aux États-Unis.
The USA has the floor now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The U.S. also wishes to thank the chair of this working group, who had a very full agenda and did an amazing job in keeping the discussion very professional and explaining the process. We would like to align ourselves with the comments made by the UK and Germany on Aquilaria. Given the conservation status of this species, we think it's really important to get the responses, keep the species in RST, particularly stage 1, and get the responses in writing. We have heard Singapore comments here. We feel that this could be provided in writing for everyone to look at, and to also for the importing countries to clearly, they are a range state. From what I hear, there is no harvest. However, importing countries are reporting it as wild. And therefore, I think there is some discussion and dialogue that needs to happen to explain this discrepancy. And we would also ask the Secretariat to, I think it's a learning moment here for everyone. We had much discussion in the working group, but not everyone was present, to, as the UK suggested, to explain yet again what happens in stage 1 of RST and what that means for the next PC. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. United States. I see that Malaysia would like to take the floor once more. And Panama as well? You'd like the floor once more, or is that flagged from before? Malaysia, please. No. We've had a lot of exchanges. I would like the chair of the working group to come back to provide some clarification, and that may respond to the concerns that you have, and that the Secretariat add with any necessary information should that be the case. So I'd like to give the floor to the chair of the working group. If you can provide us with information on the questions that have been asked by various members of the working group you chaired. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to the process for the RST, I'll leave that one in the very capable hands of the Secretariat. As far as the other interventions from members of the working group, I thank them for those, and I can understand their concerns. In particular, in regards to Asieris lanceolata, my understanding from this one was that the asterisk for South Sudan was actually there because South Sudan is not a range state. So we'll make sure that that's reflected in the updated condoc. But in regards to the other ones, I guess I'm at the hands of the working group members and the Plants Committee as to which way they would like to go with this. But I think at this point, an explanation of the RST process, when stage 1 starts and finishes and when stage 2 starts, it would be very beneficial for the observer parties. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
I thank the chair of the working group. I am going to give the floor to the Secretariat to provide more explanation on the review of significant trade. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to those parties who suggested that it might be useful to have a recap on where we are in the review of significant trade process in relation to moving from stage 1 and stage 2 for the benefit of those parties that were not present in the working group, and possibly as just a reminder to those who were, just to refresh our memories as to what happens next, basically. So if you look at the resolution itself, Resolution 12.8, RevCop 18, we are here at the first stage of the process. So the first stage was to prepare a summary from the CITES trade database of the annual report statistics showing the recorded level of direct exports for Appendix 2 species over the 5 most recent years. And that's what the working group was looking at yesterday. So on the basis of recorded levels of direct exports and information available to the committees, the Secretariat, parties and other relevant experts should choose a limited number of species country combinations of greatest concern to be included in, I'm paraphrasing now, I'm not reading it directly, to be included in stage 2 of the process. And this should happen at the first meeting, which is where we are today. What happens next is that within 30 days of this meeting, the Secretariat will notify the range states that are selected in the first stage of the process, provide an overview of the review process and an explanation as to why they were selected. So in the case of some of the cases here where there were discrepancies on the trade data, it will be we're seeking a simple explanation as to why the data was recorded the way it was. It may be misrecording, and there may be, it would just improve in the reporting from those parties. But where the country is trading, they will be asked to produce their non-detriment findings. It is correct in most cases we may have to, or in some cases we may have to verify whether or not the country is a range state for the particular species concerned. And in this, I should explain then what will happen is the parties that we write to will provide us with information, and in many cases it will be the clarifications that we heard in the working group yesterday, but it will be in written format so that everybody can see that. Not all the parties here have the benefit of hearing what those parties said in the working group yesterday. And then at the next meeting, the committees will look at the responses from the range states. In addition, there will be a detailed review done on all of the species country combinations by external consultants, and that will be done in consultation with the range states. And they will be able to provide responses to those consultations, and all of this information will be considered at the next meeting of the Plants Committee. And it is at that meeting that the committee will decide which cases should be categorized as action is needed, or which cases are of less concern and are removed from the review at that stage. And it is only at that stage for the cases that are categorized as action is needed where recommendations will be drafted by the committees for the range state, for the party concerned to actually implement. So I hope that that process is clear. We are at the first stage, which is where there have been some concerns, potential concerns and discrepancies identified in the data. We will start the consultation process with those parties. It is true to say that we have now said that we will look at ways of trying to apply a filter so that where it is a reporting discrepancy, rather than a genuine concern about sustainability, that we will try to take that into consideration in future analyses, and we will work with the committee members for the Animals and the Plants Committees and also with UNEP WCMC to address this in the future. But if the cases that have been raised that are of concern here today should be easily explained in the next stage of the process and should be eliminated then. While I have the microphone, I would just take this opportunity to maybe address some questions about the Oceras lanceolata and the reason why the working group suggested to maintain all range states, including South Sudan, in the review at this stage, which again, as I said, is the consultation phase, is because most of the trade, almost half, I think it was 40% of the trade was from a non-range state, and over 30% was from unknown origin. And then we have non-range states. We have a very complicated situation with Oceras lanceolata. So I think that was why the working group suggested or recommended that all of the range states are included and the main reported exporter in order to get a complete picture of what is happening with that particular species. So hopefully that would explain why the non-range state is left in there, and Tanzania, DRC was it? Or the Congo, sorry, Republic of the Congo. Oh no, it was Tanzania, sorry, I'm incorrect there, thank you. Why Tanzania has been retained in that, just so that we can officially have that clarification so the committee can consider that at the next meeting. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Merci, Secrétariat.
I thank the Secretariat. We also had some questions about the data from WCMC on which the species country combinations have been based. So in the database, there are some members of the committee or parties saying Singapore was a range state, but we also heard the United States and the United Kingdom that would like to retain them in the RST. So what is the position of the other members of the Plants Committee and other parties, and also the point of view of the Secretariat? So the floor is open.
Donc, je redonne la parole.
I'll give the floor now. Georgia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, it's just that I have a fairly detailed presentation in PowerPoint on the new SIG trade resolution that I prepared with Margarita Clemente for the course, the master's course last year. And it runs through all the stages with examples of work that we've done in the past in species all the way to the Standing Committee. And I spent some time to put in some nice pictures of the species involved to make it a little bit more digestible. So I'm sure Margarita would be very happy if I shared that with the Plans Committee members if they wanted it, so there's no problem.
Remercie.
We thank you, and we would be very happy if you could share that information. I'm now going to give the floor to the representative of Central, South America and the Caribbean, and then I will come back to the representative. Asia would like to speak, and Malaysia. So Central, South America and the Caribbean first.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was looking again at the results of the working group. I'm not here representing Guatemala at this moment. I'm representing the region, but I can see that there are some species that are not under the range, of which Guatemala is not the range state. I see also Giburtia, unless I see the GT, that also means Guatemala, and in Dalbergia tocorensis, Dalbergia melanoxylon. I'm not sure because there's no record or report of volumes of trade, and I am also not sure that it's naturally distributed in the country. So I'd like that to be noted and that we could remove them from that table in the way in which they are presented. Thank you.
Merci au représentant.
I thank the representative for Central, South America and the Caribbean, and I now give the floor to the representative of Asia.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the parties and the Secretariat who have provided the clarifications and their comments. My sense of the discussion just now is that parties feel that there is value in retaining some of these cases in the RST process. In the case of, for example, Singapore, to illustrate that what these discrepancies can be and the learning points that come from these discrepancies. At the same time, I also get the sense that there is no explicit saying that in spite of what is given in the ComDoc, that the PC is recommending the following species country combinations to progress to stage 2. Actually, the parties still did not make that statement that we are actually going to stage 2, but that there is still a chance now that we are in stage 1. So that is my reading of the sense of what has transpired just now. So in spite of what is given in the ComDoc, the PC is actually not necessarily recommending these species country combinations moving on to stage 2, pending clarifications by the Secretariat. If in Singapore's case, if we are to be retained, we would like to put it on record, the dramatic toning down of the lights notwithstanding, that there should be, because in the last paragraph of the recommendations, only the discrepancy in the source code A and W are listed as an example of this discrepancy. Singapore would like to put on record that there is also the additional discrepancy in re-exports being labeled as direct exports in that last paragraph. Therefore, Singapore wishes to put this down on the record.
Merci aux représentants.
I thank the representative of the Asian region. I now give the floor to the representative of Malaysia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two matters. Firstly, I support the representative of Asia, the comments that's given by representative of Asia, and I hope that the inclusion of the re-export is added into the ComDoc. Secondly, I would just like to clarify in page under D, in the table, under Aquilaria cresna, there is an asterisk that's attached after Malaysia. May I just get a clarification? What is the purpose of the asterisk? I see that the asterisk is also given for Sudan in Osiris lanceolata. Thank you.
Merci.
I thank you, Malaysia. I see no further requests for the floor. So I shall give the floor to the Secretariat.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just to come back on the asterisks, you are correct that we should have actually pointed out in the ComDoc, we'll add a footnote to say that the asterisk means this is a non-range state. But obviously we were working from a different document, but it's true we should add a footnote to explain that. And also, Guatemala, thank you for pointing this out to us, because it now looks like we may have misunderstood where it says high volume GT, which unfortunately is the code for Guatemala, but I think in this case it actually means global trade. I'm sure, yes, I'm getting a thumbs up from UNEP WCMC. So we will remove reference to Guatemala from the Aquilaria malacensis. I think that's the only one where it is mentioned as a country. But yes, to highlight that GT is indeed global trade in this instance and not Guatemala. Thank you for pointing that out. WCMC are going to clarify this, I hope.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, just to clarify, the high volume GT means that it was selected under the high volume criteria because it's a globally threatened species. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Let us resume our discussions on PC 26.6. I would like, first of all, to give the floor to the United Kingdom for some comments on the grammar of the text, and then the representative of Oceania, and then I will give you a summary of these discussions. The UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And as mentioned, we found a few grammatical errors concerning the recommendations in agenda item 16.4 under point C in the report of the working group. Under Nigeria, Pterocopsis erinaceus combination, the second sentence reading, the working group notes that a recommendation to suspend trade, and the sentence continues, there should be a space between the A and recommendation. At present, it's written as one word, a recommendation. Secondly, under Mali, Pterocopsis erinaceus country species combination, the second sentence reading, the working group also notes that a recommendation to suspend, and the sentence continues, the word trade needs to be added after suspend. Also to note that the wording of this sentence differs slightly to other sentences referencing Article 13. If I read the sentence under Mali, the addition of the word trade, it reads, the working group also notes that a recommendation to suspend is in place under Article 13. So suspend trade is in place. We perhaps also need to add the word already, so that the sentence says is already in place. And then referencing Article 13 for the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, and Nigeria, it reads, the working group also notes that the recommendation to suspend trade is already in place. So just aligning all of those recommendations so that they are the same and there's no misunderstandings. And then with regards to the heading of the table, point D1, that we have recently been discussing on the floor, which states, in accordance with paragraph 1B of Resolution Conf 12.8, Rev Cop 18, the working group recommends the following species country combinations for inclusion in stage 2 of the review of significant trade. Perhaps, given discussions here, it could be reworded to read, and I'll start from recommends the following species country combinations for possible inclusion in stage 2 of the review of significant trade. And this is following the explanation by the Secretariat of the process that we are following, and given that there are data discrepancies as highlighted by colleagues from Singapore and Malaysia and others on the floor this morning. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
I would like to thank the United Kingdom for that statement. Oceania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and I thank the United Kingdom for those excellent improvements to the document. I also support the inclusion of the word possible under D1. I'd like to take that paragraph a little bit further if I could. So it would read as the United Kingdom suggested, but at the end it would go for possible inclusion in stage 2 of the review of significant trade, comma, pending the Secretariat seeking further clarification from range states and trading parties. Full stop. So I'll say that one more time. So for possible inclusion in stage 2 of the review of significant trade, comma, pending the Secretariat seeking further clarification from range states and trading parties. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
I would like to thank the representative for Oceania for that attempt to improve the document content. Now, I would like to come back to all of you on PC 26.6 with respect to two recommendations. I would like to see which amendments we are going to be agreeing with on the question of these recommendations. On A, which concerns agenda item 16.2, I'm going to ask the DRC to please indicate what the missing sentence is. What language would the DRC like to see included in recommendations A concerning agenda item 16.2? Thank you, Madam. In the light of the discussions we have just had and reactions in the room, this is what I think is missing with respect to recommendations, and I'll start with A. On concerning 16.2, the working group recommends the following. The DRC Pericopsis elata selected following COP 11. The working group recommends that the Secretariat takes into account the positive feedback received on the progress made by the DRC Pericopsis elata in its reporting to SC 77. That's fine. The working group further recommends for the Secretariat, in consultation with the chair of the Plans Committee, publish quota proposed by the DRC. That's fine too. Then we also need, the working group recommends that the Secretariat consider recommending the withdrawal of the DRC Pericopsis elata from its report to SC 77 in the light of progress made with respect to the implementation of recommendations in the RST. That was what was missing, and that was what we raised earlier. On Prunus africana now, we have talked about selection following COP16, the recommendation that the Secretariat take account of the positive feedback received on the progress made by the DRC Prunus africana in its reporting to SC 77. And what is missing, we feel, the working group recommends that the Secretariat consider recommending the withdrawal of Congo DRC Prunus africana in its report to the SC 77 in the light of progress made with respect to the implementation of recommendations with respect to RST. Thank you, sir.
Ok, je remercie.
I would like to thank the DRC. I would now like to turn to members of the Plant Committee. Could I ask you whether you could support the proposals made by the DRC and the amendments proposed on Pericopsis elata and Prunus africana? I give the floor to the representative for Africa. Thank you, Madam. Africa fully supports the amended proposed by the DRC. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to take the floor? Any other committee members? Committee members first. I don't see any requests for the floor from committee members. I now give the floor to parties, starting with Mali. Thank you, Madam. We would agree the amendments proposed by the DRC. Thank you. Thank you, Mali. Would any other parties like to take the floor? I don't see any requests. What about observers? You have the floor. Thank you, Madam. On behalf of WMC, I'd just like to make one comment. What's happening this morning is like many other CITES meetings. We are currently considering a working group report, the working group on significant trade. And this is a question of future recommendations to the Standing Committee. I don't in any way wish to imply that I am opposed to the amendments proposed by the DRC, which seem to me to be thoroughly warranted. I just want to make sure that this matter was actually discussed in the working group. A working group report should reflect what was discussed and agreed by the working group, and the Plants Committee can then do what it likes with the report, as long as that report is a faithful record of the working group meeting. I was not in attendance, so I'm in no position to say whether or not that is the case, and I do apologize for taking the floor on this matter. Thank you, sir. I think you had an entirely relevant point to make. So when I ask the plenary meeting if they can agree the amendments proposed by the DRC, that plenary includes a number of members of the working group. If this amendment, if this report did not reflect the work of the working group, I would imagine the point would have raised. So I think that on this, since there has been no objection, the feeling is that this document, as amended, does indeed reflect the discussions in the working group. I'd like to give the floor to Belgium. Thank you, Madam. Well, what is true is that during the working group meeting, Belgium stressed the fact that the main argument for the DRC Pericopsis elata combination was on a 2021 NDF. Belgium did say that it was not really in a good position to take a decision on this because the official document on the CITES website is not, it would seem, the final document. Belgium is not in a position to have a decision in favor or against this particular matter. And as I recall it, this did come up in the working group, and there was agreement that the document on the website that can be consulted, to which one can turn for information, is not actually the reference document referred to by the DRC. Thank you. Thank you, Belgium. I note that you were a member of the working group. What I would like to do now is address working group members specifically. Could I ask you if the amendments proposed by the DRC faithfully reflect the work that you carried out in your working group meeting? And we'll have to then decide whether or not these recommendations are to be made to the Plants Committee and then to the Standing Committee. Could I ask if members of the working group agree with the proposed amendments? And when I've heard from the working group members, I will turn to the chair of the working group. Thank you.
Bon. Donc,
Good. I'm going to come to a conclusion on this item. Belgium, I have listened carefully to what you highlighted, but I think that I have support for the amendments proposed by the DRC, so they will be put into the document. So now we'll go on to the case of Panama. The Panama Dalbergia Retusa combination. So I shall turn to the representative of Panama to say that the points made will be registered in the minutes of the meeting and the paragraph will remain as it stands.
concernant le point B des recommandations,
Under point B of the recommendations, I have not seen that there are any amendments there. And on point C, the amendments that were provided by the United Kingdom are accepted, since it's a case of an omission of a term which helps to better clarify the text. And then we come to recommendation D, as highlighted by the chair of the working group and the United Kingdom. We accept the amendments to ensure greater clarity. Now, on the table itself,
bon, je suis allée un peu trop.
I went a little fast on the header for the table. We're going to come back on that to make sure it's clearer and try to note and register what was said. So we'll go past the table. So for the table, for the species Osiris lanceolata and Aquilaria crasna, we will add a footnote to explain what the asterisk used in the table means. On the concern from the representative of Central South America and the Caribbean, Guatemala will be removed for the species Aquilaria malasensis.
Maintenant, je reviens.
Now I come back and I have a question for the members of the committee. We have heard the explanations from Malaysia and Singapore. Do you consider that we can remove those two countries from the species country combination as set out in the table. And then I will also ask members of the working group about this.
No reaction. Allez-y, vous avez la parole.
Thank you.
You have to.
Can you please repeat your question again to the floor? Thank you.
Donc, suite.
So, following the explanations provided by Singapore and Malaysia, I would like to ask the members of the working group and the Plants Committee if they are in agreement that we remove Malaysia from the country combination and Singapore from Aqualaria malancensis.
Amérique centrale.
Central, South America and the Caribbean, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair. I understood it was discussed earlier, and well, of course, we agree.
Merci.
I thank the representative for Central, South America and the Caribbean, and I now give the floor to the representative of Europe.
Sorry, thank you. I think we discussed already that we would keep them in for the first stage, just for the contact stage, and not to exclude. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Europe. United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we believe we had discussed this and agreed that they would stay to enable them to provide the necessary documents to highlight that they are transit countries, and as Malaysia has stated, they have their quota and there is no wild harvest, and hence we made the suggestion of the paragraph D1 that we change the paragraph above the table to possible inclusion, that it's not sort of a foregone conclusion that they will be included in stage 2, because we'd like them the opportunity to provide the written documentation. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, United Kingdom. The principle was that we should be really sure of what we're doing, and that's why I wanted to come back and go over this page by page to ensure that all the amendments are there and that we come to the right outcome. I've taken note. So now the Secretariat will make a proposal on the chapeau that will help to remove all the ambiguities that may arise. I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And of course, noting the concerns in the room, we're trying to find a way forward here, but we are also trying to be true to the provisions of the resolution as they're currently written. And so in order to keep true to those provisions, we would propose removing the word possible inclusion, because it does say in the resolution that at this stage, species country combinations of greatest concern shall be included in stage 2 of the process. So as a compromise, we would propose deleting the word inclusion in stage, possible, sorry, not inclusion, possible to the inclusion in stage 2, and adding a sentence at the end of that paragraph instead, which would say, cases where parties are confirmed as non-range states or where discrepancies in the trade data is explained will be removed from the process. So it would not move to the stage where a detailed review is necessary or undertaken, but it will perhaps give some comfort to those countries who find themselves in the review because of discrepancies in the trade data. So we hope this compromise will address those concerns. Thank you.
Oceanie?
Oceania?
Thank you, Chair. Could I maybe just ask if the Secretariat could read that last sentence one more time, just a little bit slower? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I'll read it slowly. So the new sentence would read, cases where parties are confirmed as non-range states or where discrepancies in the trade data is explained will be removed from the process.
Alors, représentant.
So, representative for Central, South America and the Caribbean. Do you wish to take the floor? Okay. Oceania?
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering whether at the end of that sentence we might need to identify when. So, removed from the process at PC 27. Thank you, Chair.
Oui.
Yes, thank you. I think the intention is that it would be removed before PC 27 is the next one, so that we would not progress to the stage where we would need to do a detailed review of that species country combination. So that, to be honest, that is exactly the process we would have been taking, but I think it's good to have it written down so everybody understands that this kind of two-step process that would take place.
So if I can, Chair, maybe is it worth putting in something before? So removed from the process prior to PC 27? Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
I think the chair of the working group, and I see Asia and then Malaysia have requested the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I think we are closer, and being many parties quite new to this process, it does help us to put more and more clarity on this. Just one point is that we actually have explained already. So could we be even more specific on what is the further explanation? Do you mean explained in writing, explained in a response to a notification or something like that? Explain, because we have verbally explained. Thank you.
Merci au représentant de l'Asie.
I thank the representative of Asia. I'm going to ask the Secretary to tell us if that's possible. And whilst we await their response, I give the floor to Malaysia.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. I would like to agree with Oceania that we should add prior to PC 27, firstly. And with regards to where it's not range state, I would like to bring the attention of the meeting that Aquilaria cresna is not, Malaysia is not a range state to Aquilaria cresna. So is it still necessary for Malaysia to be included as part of the country selected in the combination? So I would like to propose for Malaysia to be dropped from that because according to our data, it's all artificially propagated. So I think there is no reason for Malaysia to be included in Aquilaria cresna. Thank you.
You got the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think maybe if we were to maybe mention the footnote would explain why Malaysia is there, not as a range state, but that there is trade identified coming from or to Malaysia. So I think that's, or coming from Malaysia, so it's that re-export issue. So I think maybe if that's explained, would that help for why it stays in there? Not so it's identified as a range state, but just so we can get clarification on the data and understand what actually is going on there. Thank you, Chair.
Malaisie, est-ce que...
Malaysia, is that suitable?
It's not what I want, but I think if that is the best middle road that we can take, I think we are okay with that.
Ok, merci.
Thank you for your understanding. The explanations will be very clear in the footnote. Oceania, would you like to add something?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think if with the footnote we're very clear that for both South Sudan and Malaysia, they are not a range state. They are not being included in the species-country combination. It's more an exercise of clarifying the data, so it's very clear in the footnote that they are not included. Thank you, Chair.
Je vais donner la parole.
I'm going to give the floor to the Secretariat so they can read the wording of the footnote which will be included.
Secrétariat, vous avez la parole.
Secretariat, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think there's a slight misunderstanding. The footnote would just say that the asterisk indicates a non-range state, but that coming back to the proposed additional sentence where we say cases where parties are confirmed as non-range states and where discrepancies in the trade data is explained will be removed from the process prior to PC 27. There was a suggestion or a question mark as to what we meant by explained and whether it has to be explained in writing. But I think it's not necessary in all cases to do this. What we would propose is that some of these discrepancies could be explained by just the Secretariat working with UNEP WCMC to look at the trade data. So that was what we would propose would be the first step. And if that is the case, that where we can explain these discrepancies, we would write to the party concerned and indicate that they have been removed because we had found this discrepancy, which was easily explained. If we cannot explain the data with UNEP WCMC, then we would still write to the party to ask them if they can explain the discrepancy. So I hope that that maybe will lead to cases that clearly should not be included in the process being removed at a very early stage. I hope that will give some comfort. Thank you.
Merci, Secretary.
I thank the Secretariat. I think it's getting clearer and clearer. Yes. I see Malaysia is requesting the floor, and so is the United Kingdom. So, United Kingdom.
Okay, donc je donne la...
I'll give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We want to extend our thanks to the Secretariat for reminding us to respect the integrity of the resolution here. We think this is very important, and it's incumbent upon the Plants Committee to make decisions that follow the current resolution that the parties have adopted. I guess I'm a bit confused on, I can support taking out the word inclusion because that is true to the process. I am a bit confused by this new idea that they would be, the phrase, removed prior to PC. Please, my confusion stems from normally when we go to the next PC, the Secretariat would prepare a document. They would say which countries were removed and why. And so it doesn't happen prior to the PC. It happens with the document that you prepare, right? And so I'm just trying to, I know we're trying to find a way forward and a compromise. I guess to me, the big question remains, we would like these discrepancies explained in writing and with the Secretariat in consultation and WCMC. And so to us, doing that in the document is how that process has worked in the past. And I'm trying to be fair to the other countries that have been in this process and have also had, US was in for several stony corals, black corals. We have been in stage 1, we have explained ourselves, and so I guess my expectation is that we treat all parties fairly and objectively. Thank you.
Merci, les États-Unis.
Thank you, US, for your intervention. I'm going to give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. I think the US voiced what we were thinking as well. We were going to make a suggestion that perhaps in the interests of agendas getting longer and longer at Plants Committee and Standing Committee and then COP, perhaps if we look at this due to the discrepancies in trade data and what we've discussed in the working group and on the floor this morning, we could look at a process where, not a process, but where parties have the opportunity to explain themselves prior to PC 27. Perhaps a notification could be published once the Secretariat with WCMC and in consultation with parties for them to be removed. Perhaps a notification, then it is documented and we could comment on it. I don't know if that is the way forward. Secretariat, I'll hand that proposal to you. Thank you.
Merci à la représentante.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom.
Donc, après vous avoir écouté.
Having listened to everyone and in respect of the procedures, we will keep the chapeau with a report to the 27th meeting of the Plants Committee. So, now we will go to the additional recommendations on 16.5, and these include the recommendation on Cyathea species. It will be removed. Is that acceptable? Then we come to the amendments that were put forward for Mammillaria species, and it will be modified. The working group discussed trade in Mammillaria species from the Americas. That was one of the first amendments. And noted exports of this species from Indonesia, Vanuatu, Malaysia, and the Philippines. That part will be removed and be replaced by China, the Netherlands, and Iran. Is that correct? And then the last amendment is on the addition of the concept of re-export, and it will be the working group also noted concerns on the data presented in the tables in the annexes to document PC 26, Doc 16.5, in particular in relation to the re-export and trade indicated as being artificially reproduced or propagated.
C'est bon?
Is that okay? So, thank you. We are coming to the end of the consideration of document PC 26.6. The Plants Committee adopts and
Alors, oui, il y avait...
yes, there was also the item on the membership of this working group. So the membership as amended and announced by the chair of the working group is accepted. So now the Plants Committee adopts the recommendations contained in document PC 26.6 as amended.
Malaisie, puis WCMC, UNEP.
WCMC, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to clarify, what about the language in the footnote?
So, the footnote, c'est l'astérisque, et là...
Where there is an asterisk, and that covers countries that are not range states. That is the meaning of the asterisk. Not non-range states. That is what we had agreed.
Maybe reiterate the suggestion by Oceana that that's regarding the request of Malaysia, that is not included in the table, but it's just to get a clarification of the trade data that was mentioned by Oceana, which I supported.
Oui, mais il me semble que...
Yes, indeed, but I think the chapeau has dealt with that now. We have language as a header to the table, and the asterisk, which follows the countries as well, which indicates that they are not range states, which is a way of making it clear that it's a question of getting clarification with respect to trade data. UNEP, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. If we are still able, we had wanted to make a couple of text amendments under recommendation D2, just to be clearer about the specifics of the analysis and align it slightly more with the comments of the Secretariat. Would that be okay at this point?
Ben, normalement, j'ai apporté...
Well, I did say that the document had been adopted, having given the floor for amendments. Are these questions of substance or style that you have to cover?
They are purely textual, just to align the wording slightly more with the technical language of the analysis. But they are nothing substantive.
Bon, si ça concerne pas...
Well, if they're not substantive, then I would point out we spent nearly 2 hours on this document, so thank you for your understanding, but I think we'll have to move on.
Merci. Donc nous passons au...
Thank you. We're now moving on to COM 7, the Working Group on Neotropical Tree Species. And I'd like to give the floor to one of the co-chairs of the working group. Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of both co-chairs, we would like to thank the members of the working group, the parties, IGOs and NGOs. On the basis of its mandate, we made the following recommendations. The working group recommends that the Plant Committee agree to A, with regard to paragraph A of the mandate, establish an intersessional working group given at the 26th meeting of the Plants Committee in view of the underrepresentation of range states of neotropical tree species. Omit the prioritization process for the species Araucaria araucana, Fitzroya cupressoides, Pilgerogendron uviferum, and Abies guatemalensis, Podocarpus parlotori, Balmea stormai, and take note that these recommendations to establish priorities may be applied to other CITES listed neotropical species that are priority species for parties who are range states. Then, with respect to paragraph B, recommend making recommendations for species in order to provide capacity building with respect to population management plans and NDFs, LAFs, and traceability in the trade of the species that are covered by this recommendation, this resolution. With regard to paragraph C, recommend that mechanisms for cooperation with governmental, intergovernmental, and non-governmental institutions be established in order to obtain funding to enable implementation of prioritized activities, for which purpose the Secretariat's support will be required. Invite the Secretariat to publish a notification to the parties requesting range states of neotropical tree species to A, consider whether or not to confirm the prioritized list prepared by the working group at the 26th meeting of the Plants Committee, and invite parties to submit information on priorities for strengthening implementation of the Convention with regard to neotropical tree species based on the notification. And 3, note that note that implementation of projects funded by donors and cooperation efforts involving other IGOs and NGOs, which already include species listed in the Annex 2 document PC 26.33, will continue. Further fundraising efforts will be geared towards new projects based on the priorities established by the relevant parties that are range states, in accordance with the results of the aforementioned notification to the parties. And D, with respect to paragraph D of the mandate, inform the Plants Committee and the Conference of the Parties as appropriate of the outcome of the task. Thank you, Madam.
Je remercie.
I would like to thank the chair of the working group for that report, and I note that you are recommending an intersessional working group. Before we establish that working group, I would like to hear from the room on this report, COM 7. Committee members, you have the floor. I don't see any requests for the floor. Observer parties, you have the floor. Peru, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam. I would like, first of all, to thank the chair of the working group and the Secretariat for the report on this agenda item. I would like to briefly refer to Peru's activities for the implementation of the decisions taken at the last COP on the question of neotropical trees. I would like to stress that in February 2023, through a resolution made by the National Forestry and Wildlife Service, SERV4, which is the CITES administrative authority, we adopted an action plan for the proper implementation of Siwahako, Dipteryx, and Tahuari, Handroanthus genus, to be listed in CITES Appendix 2 in 23-24. This allows for activities in order to ensure the proper technical and legal conditions for the implementation of these two species in Appendix 2 by November 24. There are 6 components involved in the plan: improved regulatory framework, population assessment, export monitoring, evaluation of timber stocks, evaluation of forestry management, and strengthening capacity building and dissemination. These measures are going to be implemented by SERV4 and a number of different actors in the forestry service in Peru, and this provides for proper articulation and dialogue between the public sector and the private sector, and there are some 20 organizations involved in this. The Ministry for the Environment is the scientific authority for Peru and crowns it all. We are hoping that we are going to be able to work with range states and importing states in order to help us deal with the forestry management aspects of this certification, good practice in timber trade, tools in order to help with the timber identification for these species, and we will provide foreign exchange and technical and financial support. And in conclusion, I would say that we will be providing the Secretariat with more information once we have published this notification to enable notification of this to the parties. Thank you.
Je remercie le
I would like to thank the representative of Peru. Could I ask if any other parties would like to take the floor? I I don't see any requests from parties. Would any observers like to take the floor? I don't see any requests for the floor. I would suggest, oh, Mexico, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam. With respect to the membership of this working group, it seems that yesterday IPCI France was among the meetings. I think that they yesterday did say that they had been present. We need to perhaps double check, but I think IPCI France was there. That's what my notes say anyway. We'll have to double check. Thank you.
OK. Donc,
Thank you. Now, as for this, so the membership list will be amended accordingly. The European Union has the floor.
Apologies, my colleague said that she was also present in that meeting, and I don't see us mentioned, so just maybe if we can check. Thank you.
OK. Merci.
Thank you. I do recall that IPCI did ask that they participate in the working group. Is it true of the EU as well? Did you actually express interest in participating in the working group when it was established?
That's what I understood, yes. I have to... Can I come later to confirm? Yep, thank you.
Oui, oui. Yep.
Absolutely. Could I ask if anyone else would like to take the floor on this COM7 report before I establish the intersessional working group?
L'Union européenne.
The European Union, would you like to take the floor?
Vous avez... Oh. OK.
Okay, then.
Donc, That's
now... The membership of the working group has been amended. We will have the European Union and IPCI. SSN, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam. I simply wish to say that the working group, with respect to one of the points raised, was that that working group become an intersessional working group. So that range states could participate in the group. The understanding was that the working group membership will be amended once the notification to parties has been published.
Merci.
Thank you, SSN.
France.
France. Thank you, Madam. I must confess I'm not quite clear what's happening. We seem to be turning the in-session working group into an intersessional working group. Is that transformation to happen now? Are you going to be asking for delegations here present to show interest in the participation in this intersessional working group, or will that be dealt with later through notification? Of course, there could be a combined approach, an invitation to those present to show interest followed by notification. You read my mind, sir. That's what we're doing now. A working group was established. The working group, the in-session working group we had here, decided that there should be an intersessional working group because there was underrepresentation of range states of neotropical tree species in the in-session working group. What we have to do now is adopt this report. If COM7 is adopted, and then the mandate in paragraph B will be agreed, and the intersessional working group that is mentioned in A little Roman 1 will be established. And the question that we're tackling right now is that we're in a situation comparable to that obtaining when the in-session working group was set up. In other words, the range states are underrepresented here. So what do we do? Do we establish the working group now with its mandate? Then we have to decide whether or not the makeup of that working group is to be determined following a notification. Has my reply answered at least some of your questions? Thank you. Well, I would have been in favor of a slightly more focused approach. I think we could have said that delegations in the room are invited to express their interest in participating in the intersessional working group with a safety net which would provide the opportunity for those delegations that are not represented here in Geneva to express their interest following a notification, which will allow us to save a great deal of time by jumping a stage rather than having to start from scratch now. Well, that's exactly what I intended doing, sir. Thank you. I would like to give the floor to the representative of Central and South America and the Caribbean, and then Portugal. You have the floor, sir. Thank you, madam. I have a suggestion to make. This has happened on other occasions with respect to such working groups. The idea has been that all of the range states are members of the working group, so they wouldn't have to be here to express interest. We've proceeded in that way in the past. So we have said all of the range states for neotropical tree species will be members of the intersessional working group, and the working group could also be joined by other observer parties represented here in the Plants Committee. I think that would be a way of moving forward with respect to the intersessional working group membership. Thank you, Representative for Central and South America and the Caribbean. I now give the floor to Portugal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to propose exactly the same solution just proposed by the delegate of Central and South America and the Caribbean. It was the solution used in previous constitutions of the same group of neotropical tree species to include all the range states and then other parties, observers and IGOs, NGOs that want to join the working group. If you see the previous mandates and the creation of previous working groups, it was the solution used. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Portugal. Would anyone else like to take the floor? That does not. Any observers? No?
Merci pour...
Thank you for your patience. So we will proceed as follows. We will first of all move to the adoption of document PC 26-COM7 as amended. And once the document has been adopted, I will propose the terms of reference for the working group which is to be established. Once we have the terms of reference, then we will proceed to the composition of the working group, and it will be partial because we will have a composition made up of the participants here who wish to take part in the working group, and via a notification we will invite other parties to participate in the working group, and the final membership will be sent to you. Thank you. Is that agreeable?
Portugal, vous avez...
Portugal, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We fully agree, but there's just a minor correction that I wanted to request. In the Spanish version of the document, it repeats acting representative for Central America. And it says acting representative of the acting representative. It's just a minor correction.
D'accord, le secrétariat.
Thank you. The Secretariat takes note. Colombia, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand the solution that is being proposed on the makeup of the working group, but I think, as we heard from the representative for Central, South America and the Caribbean, that logically and in practice we include all the range states, and I understand that they can be invited. We can invite other parties later to participate in the working group. But from the beginning, we would also like the membership to be made up in one go with parties that are range states. Thank you.
Merci, Colombie.
Thank you, Colombia. But we cannot impose on parties that they participate in a working group. We can invite them to do so, and if they wish to do so, they will take part. I think the least we can do is to invite them without any restrictions, and if all the range states take part in the working group, well, that would be wonderful. I'm going to give the floor to the representative for Central and South America and the Caribbean. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would like to insist that this is not the first time. This working group has quite a wide-ranging history. It has fallen to us to co-chair it very often, and I agree with what Colombia says. It's correct, and it's necessary that within the memberships we see all countries that are range states participating for the concerned species. It's not the first time it's been proposed in this way, but it may help us to have the notification sent to all these parties so that they can be aware of it. Thank you. Thank you, says the Chair.
Donc,
So, we are going to proceed to adopt document PC 26-7 as revised with the composition of the working group. So, will that be acceptable? So, the Plants Committee adopts the recommendations contained in document PC 26-7 as amended. Thank you. So, I propose the mandate for the working group as follows. Review the recommendations presented in document PC 26-7 revised and make recommendations to the next meeting of the Plants Committee PC 27. Are there any comments on the mandate for the intersessional working group as I have just read?
pas de demande d'intervention.
No request for the floor. Now we will go to the composition of this working group. It has been mentioned that the membership of the working group is open to range states and that they are invited to participate in the working group, and I will request members of the committee who are here present and observer parties and observers to please express their interest in participating in this working group. You have the floor. Committee members.
Région Amérique centrale.
Central, South America and the Caribbean. Observer parties. Chile, Peru, Colombia, Panama, USA, Portugal, France, European Union, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium. Now I open the floor for observers to express their interest in participating. SSN, IPCI, France, Europe, Traffic, WWF, ITTO,
Environmental law. Thank you.
International Society of Violin and Bow Makers. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Secretariat, would it be possible to read the list of the members for this working group, and not forgetting it is not the full list yet?
Thank you, Chair. The members so far are the Central South America and the Caribbean region. In terms of parties, we have Chile, Peru, Colombia, Panama, USA, Portugal, France, the European Union, Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium. In terms of observers, Species Survival Network, IPCI France Europe, Traffic, WWF, ITTO, CIEL, and the International Society of Violin and Bow Makers.
Merci.
Thank you. So, via a notification, we will invite the parties to take part in this working group. The final membership of this working group will then be published via another notification, whilst recalling that all range states for the species are invited to participate in this working group. I give the floor to the representative of Central, South America and the Caribbean. Thank you, Madam Chair. You have just said what I was going to say, so we fully agree. Thank you.
Merci.
I thank you. Now we will move to the consideration of the next item, which is document PC 26-8, which is the working group on CITES and forests. This working group was one which I chaired, so I will give you an update of the report. So, in terms of the recommendations, A, concerning paragraph A of the mandate, the working group recommends that the Plants Committee agrees the report on the CITES and Forests Compendium COP19 to COP20 as contained in Annex 1 to the present document. B. Concerning paragraph B of the mandate, the working group recommends that the Plants Committee invites the Secretariat to use the revised draft terms of reference contained in Annex 2 to the present document in the process of commissioning the study called for in paragraph B of decision 19.32, and C. Concerning paragraph C of the mandate, the working group recommends the Plants Committee to invite the Secretariat to incorporate in its report to the Standing Committee the challenges and opportunities associated with any future initiative on CITES and forests, and to take into account the discussions at PC 25, SC 74, COP19 and PC 26. So those are that is the report of the working group. I now open the floor for any comments.
Je donne la parole.
I give the floor to the representative of Oceania.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your excellent chairing of the working group on CITES and forests. I apologise for not having raised this in the working group, but when considering the table in PC 26, Com 8, Annex 1, Section 1, I would like to propose that we add 2 more resolutions to the table. These include Resolution Comp 16.7, Rev Cop 17 on non-detriment findings, and Resolution Comp 18.7, Rev Cop 19 on legal acquisition findings. I would recommend that these are identified as technical in column 3, as they provide guidance for making non-detriment findings and legal acquisition findings. Thank you, Chair.
Merci au représentant.
I thank the representative of Oceania for these additions. I give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Canada thanks the Chair of the In-Session Working Group for this document and the members for the discussion. The working group added a footnote in the revised Annex 2 on page 9 to recall that at COP19, it was agreed that the work on CITES and forests would, as a first step, focus on CITES listed 3 species during this intersession period and could eventually extend later to more species. However, this is not an official record document. Canada believes that instead of the footnote in revised Annex 2, it could be more appropriate to delete the footnote and add instead a new recommendation in the working group report. Canada wishes to propose a new recommendation paragraph, which we believe reflects the working group's discussion about the scope of the activities from decisions 1932 and 1933 on CITES and forest, and recalling the history of the discussion at COP19. The new paragraph D would read, and you already have a copy of this text. So paragraph D, concerning the scope of any new initiative on forests and a compendium on CITES and forests, the working group recommends that the Plans Committee continues focusing on CITES listed 3 species for this intersessional period, recalling that during the COP19, it was agreed that although the scope could eventually necessitate consideration of all forest species, including both fauna and flora, the initial focus should be on the 3 species, period. Thank you. Happy to repeat if needed. We have another point also. Can I go on with the other point, or do you want me to repeat?
I'll just wait for the Secretariat to finish taking notes.
C'est bon, Secrétariat?
Secretariat, can we go ahead? So, would it be possible to reread slowly to enable the Secretariat to ensure everything has been noted? Thank you.
So paragraph D, concerning the scope of any new initiative on forests and the compendium on CITES and forests, the working group recommends that the Plans Committee continues focusing on CITES listed 3 species for this intersessional period, recalling that during the COP19, it was agreed that although the scope could eventually necessitate consideration of all forest species, including both fauna and flora, the initial focus should be on 3 species.
C'est bon, Canada?
Canada, you can continue on to the next point. Thank you.
Additionally, given the lack of record on the agreement of the approach on CITES and forests, including in the 2 decisions on this item, 1932 and 1933, we would suggest the following amendment to the Annex 1 in the introduction. So in Annex 1, the introduction, the very first line there, it currently reads, Decision 1932 and 1933 request that any new initiative on CITES and forests focuses on or prioritize, and then we would delete the words as a first step and leave the rest of the sentence there and the paragraph there. So just delete as a first step. Thank you.
Merci, Canada. Avez-vous d'autres?
Thank you, Canada. Do you have any further comments? No. So thank you. I now open the floor to other parties. Mexico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to suggest an amendment on paragraph C, where it says challenges and opportunities associated with any future initiative on CITES and forest, in alignment with decision 1933, we can replace on CITES and forest by relating to CITES list forest species, comma, with particular focus on tree species. This is what we have in the decision, just to be consistent. I think it's more appropriate than just saying CITES and forest. You want me to repeat? So to replace on CITES and forest by relating to CITES list forest species, comma, with particular focus on tree species. Thank you.
Merci, Mexique.
Thank you, Mexico. I now give the floor to the representative of Oceania.
Thank you, Chair. I thank Canada for their proposed paragraph D. I think that solves the problem of communicating the discussions at COP19 quite effectively. I think the only suggested amendment to their proposed text would be to change the word agreed when referencing to the working group at COP19 agreed. I think the challenge we've identified since the working group was that there is no documented agreement that the working group agreed it, so maybe we need to change that to discussed at COP19 working group. Thank you, Chair.
Merci, Océanie.
Thank you, Oceania. Mexico, would you like to take the floor once more?
Sorry, and we forgot to say that we also support Canada's proposal. Thank you.
Merci, Mexique.
Thank you, Mexico. Do we have any further requests for the floor? United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for chairing the working group on CITES and forests. We'd like to say that we agree with Canada's proposal and that by Oceania to just change that a decision wasn't made at COP19 working group, but we did discuss it. And then we have a proposed text addition to section 3 of the annex in the heading. Examples of cross-cutting processes of the convention that contribute to global forest relevant mandates under, and here we'd like to add a potential CITES and forest programmatic approach, as that is not yet decided on. Thank you, Chair. I can repeat if you'd like, Secretariat. No, thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Do we have any further request for the floor? No? Observers. So, I will give the floor to the representative for Central, South America and the Caribbean. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Adding to what we've heard from the representative of the United Kingdom, I would leave the text in section 3. In addition, it's possible to say a programmatic approach on CITES and forest for the period COP19 to 20. What we can do is come back to the rest once we've solved the issue of this approach. We look at the approach first, and then we go into the subject of projects. Otherwise, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Thank you.
Merci aux représentants.
I thank the representative for Central, South America and the Caribbean.
Je m'adresse au...
Would like to speak to the representative for the Central South America and Caribbean region. If I've understood, you request that the title of section 3, there we remove the wording list of projects for the period between COP19 and COP20. Is that what you would like? Yes, Madam Chair, because so that we remain consistent with what was said by those who spoke before me. First of all, let's resolve the issue of the programmatic approach, and then we move on. So we need to ensure the approach. It's a case of just trying to be logical in how we proceed.
Oui, mais lors du...
Yes, but during the working group and the discussions we held, the approach is on the cross-cutting processes, and then we'd have a list of projects. The projects aren't linked to the programmatic approach that could possibly be taken by CITES. And I think that was added by Mexico during our discussions, if I'm not mistaken. So these are not projects to be implemented. They're projects that are underway, and it was to differentiate between the processes and that which was listed, the projects listed in this section. So the CITES tree species program, that was part of the discussion.
Vous avez la parole.
You have the floor.
Gracias, señora presidenta. Por supuesto.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, I fully understand. If that's clear to everyone, I agree with you. Thank you, madam. Thank you. Would anyone else like to take the floor? Mexico, you have the floor.
Yeah, I forgot to add another amendment on Annex 1 on what it mentions Section 3. Again, to have consistency in this case with Decision 19.32, where it says the convention that contribute to global forest relevant mandates to have and forest policies and initiatives. This is again to have consistency with decision 19.32. We sent that comment when we were requested to send it through email, and it was not reflected. Thank you.
Je remercie.
Thank you, Mexico. I assume the Secretariat has taken note of that. Thank you. I don't see any further requests for the floor. The Plants Committee adopts the recommendations in PC 26.8 as amended. Thank you.
Donc, thank you. Par avance, je vais...
The chair kindly apologizes to the interpreters for the extra time the meeting is going to take up this morning. I have some information for the plenary. The sum 3 is available on the website, and we will be considering sum 3 this afternoon. We will also be considering 8 to Rev 1, which is the Plants Committee work plan for 23 to 25, which is to be adopted this afternoon. Thank you for that. I would like to give the floor to the Secretariat for an announcement.
Donc, je donne la parole à l'Afrique du Sud pour annoncer.
I would like to give the floor to South Africa. They have an announcement to make about their side event. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At 12:15, South Africa will be having a side event. I'm not sure whether we're going to have it here or in the room that was, same room, EF. So we are expecting you to come and join us. Thank you.
Merci et...
Thank you, and see you at 2 o'clock.